Giblin stares with his wary eyes into the cloudy liquid. You sit on the squishy ground trying to collect your thoughts from the repeated electrocutions, mental anguish, and exhaustion. What is that wizard doing? Maybe something got him. Not to worry, Giblin. He knows what he's doing. He's been gone for a long time. Giblin is unusually concerned for Corin. The dwarf is normally irritated and grouchy in the presence of the wise but clumsy wizard. Just then, before the two of you realize it, Corin slips out of the fluid into the soft ground. I don't think you need the spell to breathe the fluid. Really? Giblin incredulously replies. I think I'll be taking that water-breathing spell all the same. You decide in the moment that you're willing to give it a try and save Corin a spell. The pool is miles deep, but what is more concerning is that I sense a titanic threat. I didn't see anything, but its presence is clear. We have to proceed carefully. What do you mean, a titanic threat? I don't know. Just keep your hammer ready, but swim and sink carefully. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross.
And I'm Dan Ream, with nothing prepared to say.
Okay.
It's just me, folks.
And me.
Distracted by the story, wondering what the threat is at the bottom of the breathable lake.
All right. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that today. It is our dungeon walkthrough. It's like we're buying it.
It's a spec dungeon.
Yes, a spec dungeon. Oh, yeah. So it is our dungeon talk. And last month, you talked about White Plume Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And so this week is sort of a continuation of the story that we started with Wave Echo Cave. That's the first Underdeep place you go is that cave. This is the last place you go. And so this is from the book Phandelver and Below, The Shattered Obelisk. And the name of this dungeon, which seems funny to call it as such, but it is called the Briny Maze.
They had some almost K-Wood-esque fun with that name.
Yes, they did. Yeah, definitely. They had some fun with it, and dangerous. This is not a walk in the park. I'm just glad we're doing it from afar. This is designed for, I'm trying to remember, in the book, you are 10th level when you walk in here. And so there are 10th level threats in this Briny Maze. It is not a giant maze by any stretch of the imagination. Again, there's no pun intended there that you'll understand soon. But it certainly can be confusing, kind of like the Wave Echo Cave. It's not a go here, go there. You are winding your way around. You will find yourself crossing paths that you've already crossed in this Briny Maze, I guess as implied by calling it a maze. As we've talked in the past, we'll talk about the lore of the Briny Maze, give a bit of a description of the levels, talk about the creatures that you'll find here, and then some unique characteristics that may not come up in just sort of the description of the location. So the lore of the Briny Maze. This is the home of Ilvash, who is an unholy creature, the descendant of Il-Sensine, a mind flayer god. The Briny Maze, is a domain that is in the far realm. It is in the Briny Maze that the Mind Flayer fanatics, this is going to talk a little bit about the story of the Shattered Obelisk, but it is nonetheless part of the lore. Mind Flayer fanatics tried to rebuild this Shattered Obelisk through a ritual of ancient magic. And this ritual will turn the citizens of Phandalin into a new colony and a foothold of mind flayers in the land of Faerun. And so the goal is, as mentioned, they want to expand their domain. They want to expand their influence, and Phandalin, unfortunately, is the target. I don't know that any reason specifically is given other than the town of Phandalin is built over a temple of sorts that are underneath. So there's a lot of like dungeon underneath Phandalin, and so I think has something to do with why they want to do this. Also, shards of this obelisk are scattered all over this area of Phandalin, which is part of what the adventure is the adventurers during this are kind of going and trying to collect these shattered obelisks before some unknown entity is collecting them at the same time. Not really known why, other than it's dark magic and it's not good and it shouldn't be in the wrong hands. And so that is what drives the adventurers to the Briny Maze in the Shattered Obelisk. As going back to the lore, many have invaded the Briny Maze to strike out at Ilvash and or steal ancient treasure or knowledge that could be found in this home of Ilvash. It is rumored that the maze protects Ilvash by absorbing lost and injured intruders into its walls. So after time, if you become exhausted, you lay down, you rest for too long, you're knocked unconscious, you will be absorbed into this briny maze.
It's very Cthulhu.
Yes, yes, this is very much a Cthulhu trek. It is unknown how much of the maze's walls are original or they're the flesh of those that are absorbed. I guess that it would make sense. I think I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but it makes sense to mention right now that as adventurers, you know that there's something just off about this location. The structure is pinkish gray, it's wrinkled, slightly squishy. What you don't know, and you might be able to figure out after time, is you are actually indeed walking in a brain, a giant titanic brain. And so the creep factor is very high through this whole thing.
Briny brainy.
The briny brainy. So as far as the description goes, I just gave you a little bit there. Squishy. What I think about when I was reading this and thinking, how would I describe this to people? So if you're a Star Wars person and you think about The Empire Strikes Back, the Millennium Falcon is in the asteroids flying around being chased by TIE fighters. Han Solo dips into this giant asteroid and there's a hole, a cave there. And they fly in there for refuge and they land. Something's attacking the outside, some kind of creature's attacking the outside and sucking on and chewing on the power cables. So Leia and Han and Chewbacca go outside to clean these things off, and they step into this humid air. And when they step onto the ground, it's squishy, and you can hear in the film that there's like when they're walking. That's what this is, because the walls. It's very humid inside this briny maze, and there's a moist sheen in the air at all times. So long-term vision, now granted, there aren't any places really in the maze where you'd have to look past, 30, 40 feet, because every corridor is short and twisty. But it would be difficult to see very far because there is a haze, humid haze in the air. And so I just thought of that example of, I don't know if there are any other film examples of humid, squishy.
Yeah, not like that. That's
floor.
A good one. Do you ever find out who the brain is?
You don't.
Okay.
You don't. It's just a structure built in the far realm. My guess is some elder brain just got so large. I don't know. It doesn't give that as to like the origin, how it was built. It was just created for Ilvash. Maybe the Mind Flayer god just created it for him in the Outer Realm. That's a great question. I wonder if there's any detail on that out there. So you'd think the walls that are also like this pinkish gray and wrinkled, and you think like when you look at a brain, it's got the twisties and turnies that make those wrinkles. It is tough as stone. You can slash at it, but it heals itself instantly.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not that you can never get through it. It would just be, you would have to be like a constant hack to be able to try to get into it. But then you're just really kind of cutting into flesh, and you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, as a DM, you'd probably have to give him like level of exhaustion if they got through it, because it'd be like no.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. Every time you rest in the Briny Maze, there's a chance that you actually get a level of exhaustion while you're here. Resting isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it's also...
It's risky.
It's risky. The last thing about like the senses of this, I guess it's not the last thing. I had two more things about the senses. One is the smell inside, or the odor, has just a slight spoiled odor.
Ugh.
So if you think about like what that might smell like while you're in there, not overwhelming, but just enough that you're like, ugh.
Gotta hope you go nose blind quick.
Right. And the last thing is the illumination. There's a violet light that emanates from no particular source, and it's quite bright inside this Briny Maze. So it's the hazy. So think about like when the sun starts cracking through in a foggy day, that sort of bright haze is what I'm imagining this to be. So you find yourself in this enormous titanic brain when you enter the Briny Maze. So the maze is split to a left side and a right side, just like a brain, with and there are passageways between the two sides that are doors that you have to figure out how to open. You can't just open them. You can't walk up to them and slide them apart or push them open. They're locked shut, but there is a magical way to open them. The doors can be silently opened throughout different areas of the maze. You will come across in different corridors, or I'm doing air quotes here, but the rooms. They aren't really rooms. They're just spaces. There will be two metal rods locked into the wall, and you have to connect those two rods to open a door. That's kind of a secret. So if you're into spoilers or not into spoilers, that would be a spoiler for this whole thing. That's kind of a mystery of how do you open the doors. But when you find these, you have to connect them, and I don't mean by like touching them together, but by like if they're close enough, one person holds both of them, and that will activate a door someplace in the Briny Maze to open. You have 10 minutes to find the door and before it shuts again.
Oh, gosh.
Then the worst part that I implied a little bit in my story is when you do that, you are electrocuted and you take a significant amount of damage. It's like 66 or something like that of electric damage. So you would probably want to try to cast a resistance to elements, or is there, maybe that's not, yeah, resistance to elements reduces that, right?
Mm-hmm. You can choose
maybe. Yeah.
So how would you know to ever try that again if it doesn't open
right there in that space?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know. Other than I think there's some people that can tell you that.
Okay.
You just have to, and that's another thing about this. Again, it's a spoiler, so if you're looking to play this, you might just hit pause and maybe save this episode. One part of this Briny Maze that would be a benefit to figure out pretty quickly for the players is you don't want to fight everything. You may want to attempt to parlay here, and there's lots of opportunity for it, but at the same time, there's lots of opportunity to feel like that's something that needs to be killed or die, and so you have to fight that a little bit. But so, yeah, you will learn that by talking to people. You might even learn from somebody in the location you are before you get here. Because the way the adventurers in this story get here is you go through a dungeon called Ilithanok, which is an underground temple. And there's some people that you might find there that are familiar with how the Briny Maze works. Others can come to the Briny Maze, but by like a plane shift or some type of a spell, magical means like that. I don't know that you can just float there through the astral sea to get to the Briny Maze. I'm not sure. That would be a DM's call if you wanted to just add the Briny Maze into a separate adventure and not use the obelisk. So you're electrocuted when you do that. The fun part is when the rods are not within space that one person can touch them. There are a couple sets of them that are across the room from each other. So hopefully you have enough people in your party that are enough people A and enough people B that are healthy enough that you can touch both rods by connecting hands or connecting to each other, and then all of you getting the shock to open the door that's someplace else in the... So there's some experimentation that goes into this to figure out. Again, you might be able to find somebody to tell you, up in this part, those rods open this door and whatnot. I think it's possible to explore probably 75% of the Briny Maze without the doors, but you have to do it at least once to get to where you're headed. When you first enter the Briny Maze, you can choose to go left or right. And that's how, if you come back to that entrance, you can pass to the left, to the right, without encountering the doors. But to get to your destination, you're going to have to do it at least once. Plus, it'll save a lot of time if you use the rods and figure out what doors they open. Because to get back to that original space, it's likely some repopulation of creatures and whatnot will come about.
That's interesting that there are potentially helpful NPCs in the maze. That's something when I homebrew, I don't think to do in a dungeon.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess my brain goes to, how have they survived here? Why are they still here? And they've probably answered that in there, but that's the question that stops me from doing that, I think.
Yeah. I was actually surprised at how much you can parlay with in this maze, in this dungeon. Because most people aren't there just by chance. Almost everything is... I mean, why would you... Why would you come here other than you have some purpose? And of course, knowing what level you are here, that also should give you an indication of what you're facing here. So it might behoove you to try not to fight everything. There are some really tempting spots where you're like, oh man, if I did this, because there's some pretty alluring treasure in here as well, but it's owned by somebody. And so you might have to deal with them if you want that treasure. So I thought this was cool. Depending on where you are in the maze, there are certain benefits to adventurers. So think about the brain and what parts of the brain do what for you, and it kind of fits these areas. So in the occipital lobe, is that what it's called, occipital? It enhances awareness and gives you advantage on wisdom checks. When you move into the temporal lobe, it gives you enhanced auditory. So you get bonuses on listening and noticing things, sounds and stuff like that. In the parietal lobe, I really should have checked with my daughter on the pronunciation. Parietal lobe. That enhances spatial positioning, and you cannot be knocked prone unless you choose to be. And then in the frontal lobe, that enhances spatial awareness and an eagerness to help others. So your help action is a bonus action. So I thought that was kind of a cool little twist. I mean, you wouldn't think a dungeon would give you, especially something like this, would give you any benefit. But here, I thought that was a really cool sort of addition that they did to make this an interesting adventure. Anything about the level description that you came across in your research?
So my research, this is the first one that you've listened to of our dungeons, I go out and I try to find critical reviews and what did the community think.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a lot about, to tell you the truth, to kind of spoil my part early, there's very little commentary on this out in the internets. It was very sparse. Nothing that I could see in a so-called published magazine or anything like that. All I saw was one DM's blog.
Okay.
And he reviewed it. So, no, there wasn't anything about though.
All right. Well, I don't know this. I should have done the research. And usually I go to the Forgotten Realms wiki. I did not do that on that. I did not do that on this one.
I don't know that they've got much on it because it didn't pop up in my search at all.
It just makes me wonder if this is brand new. Like the Shattered Obelisk is the first time that this has shown up.
Rather than being pulled in from 3.5 or something like that.
Yeah. So without looking at that wiki, I don't know if there's reference to it prior. But the fact that your evidence shows that there's not much written on it, so perhaps it's brand new and not many people have gotten to this point of this adventure. I have to say, just a general note about, and this is kind of taking our dungeon and pulling back the camera a little bit. This is an adventure I really want to run as a DM. I've mentioned to you that it is such a, there's a lot of flexibility and freedom for the adventurers, but for the DM, it is a very linear story. Yeah. And so the players can go do all this stuff, but it always comes back to this one line, which I really like as a DM, because sometimes we came in across in the Waterdeep. Mm-hmm. We started the adventure of the dragon heist, but man, it went off the rails, and not in a negative way. It just, you guys took a right-hand turn and we just went with it. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time to come back to, oh, we're doing this. Mm-hmm. And it took us in a lot of really cool directions, but but this story, the Shattered Obelisk, you come back and you have very clear objectives in this. But those objectives give you some options to be able to go places and try some different things. So I am really excited to run this. This might be a good school campaign for a group that if I got a freshman group, we could play this over a couple of years, mm-hmm. maybe 3 during Game Club. So with that, so you got a pretty good indication of what the lore is. This is a Mind Flayer lair. The level description, you are walking around in a brain, which is very fitting for a Mind Flayer. So let's talk a little bit about the creatures and the NPCs. We've talked a little bit about how you might use them. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about who they are. So it is a unique bestiary of creatures in this Briny Maze. In the Shattered Obelisk, they have their Appendix A is a bestiary, and it's pretty large. There's a lot of stuff in this maze and in this adventure that is not published anyplace else. Some things that you have seen before are phase spiders, flame skulls. There's a whole, as you might guess, there's a whole menagerie of slimes that you have the potential to come across. Some wraiths. Am I saying this right? A spectator? Mm-hmm. That just seems not right, because I think of somebody who watches something. But there's a spectator in here, so there's a little bit of undead. Mm-hmm. Just a heads up. Let me see if there's anything else that we would know. Oh, there's a beholder in this Briny Maze. Oh, flumps. There are flumps in here. Huh. Which, they've got a cool story. There is an assist, either for you or from them, either from them or from you, someone helping somebody in that point. So there are, talking about some things that are unique to the Shattered Obelisk, we have psionic ashen rites, which are, and I get some of these confused. Let me see, actually, I have it right here. Ashen rites are humanoids consumed by cruelty and rage, where they died in an area corrupted by the far realm. The creature sometimes rises as an ashen rite. The skin of these undead horrors is desiccated, and their eyes often glow with otherworldly power. These ashen rites are CR 5, and the psionic ones are CR 7. So you have those to deal with in here. Yeah, here's another monster you'll know, but super cool. You encounter a hunting party of Githyanki. Now, if there's a certain path that if you follow this path, you have the potential to end up with one of their famous swords, their famous silver swords. If you don't know the lore of a Githyanki knights carry these legendary silver swords. The purpose of them is when you are in the astral sea, these silver swords can cut someone's cord so that you can actually kill the person. And so they're not sucked back to wherever they came from. And so that makes a Githyanki knight extremely dangerous. So when you gain this sword in the Briny Maze, you have an idea that either you're going to encounter some Githyanki or they have been dealt with here. So it's a cool find. It's a cool story. But either way, when you encounter these Githyanki, it can be very dangerous. They could be creatures to get some good information from as well. If you're holding their sword, though, be very careful. There is a devastatingly ugly and horrible creature called the Encephalon Cluster. I'm showing Dan the picture right now. It's that thing right there. And the acephalon cluster it pays no heed to an elder brain or its mind flayer progenitors. This grotesque creature shambles through dark and forgotten caverns, spewing warped progeny, progeny, is that it? Progeny so it can multiply. As such, many mind flayers view encephalon clusters as insidious viruses. If left unchecked, a single encephalon cluster can quickly become a gorging menace that can overrun an entire mind flayer colony.
Before you even said that, I was thinking that sounds like, and the way they've named it, like encephalitis or something, where you've got a disease that's destroying.
Yeah, and so this
brain.
thing is just everybody knows about it, and it's just kind of making its way around the Briny Maze, and it releases these. It's these spores or something pop, and these things come out that are called encephalon gemmules, and they are just these little sort of creatures that have these tentacles, and they float around and they cause all sorts of problems. They're not as bad to fight, but the encephalon cluster is a serious danger. Then there are some named NPCs. There's Shalfie and Jitterjaws. They are obsessed with something is in their head that they probably will not bother you if you don't bother them, because they are so intent on whatever it is that they're doing. Shalfie is, I forget what he is, but Jitterjaws is this horrible creature, horrible looking creature. Now I'll get you a picture of it here. I call it a flesh meld. And it's just a stitched together collection of flesh that has mouths and other appendages, and it's just a globular sort of thing, and it is chewing at the floor at the same time that Shuffley is chopping at the floor. They have this idea in their head that something is underneath them, and they refuse to let it go. You can deal with them, or you can help them, whatever it is you want to do, but they are intent. I promised you this about 4 months ago. After we finished talking about the Amethyst Dragons, that, I've got a dungeon with an Amethyst Dragon, so I finally have it. This is where you find an Amethyst Dragon, in the Briny Maze. So if we think back to Amethyst Dragons and things that they hate, I'm tossing that, hoping you remember what it was that they are fascinated with the Far Realms, but they have a hate for, remind me if you remember.
It's any aberrations that come from there. Yeah.
Okay. So that is why this Amethyst Dragon is here. This Amethyst Dragon has found a hidden spot in the Briny Maze. It's only accessible by a secret passage. And he's not alone, however. His name, by the way, is, I'll give my best here, Loanziel is his name. It's a young Amethyst Dragon, and he is here, or she is here, seeking to weaken Ilvash, and he remains hidden and strikes out when he can. He's not alone, though. He's with a human mage named Gossa, and so the two of them sort of they sort of sit in this spot, and when they feel the time is right, they will enter the Briny Maze, attack something, destroy something, and then retreat back to their hidden lair, all for the purpose of weakening Ilvash. How long they plan to stay, I don't know. This could be like one of those things that's kind of like they're just here forever to keep Ilvash in check. So anyway, so you can, if you encounter them, you can deal with them, you can work with them, you can ignore them, you can any of those things.
I was going to say I can't think of an instance where you oppose them, but I could see ignoring them like you do you. We got other things we want to accomplish.
So that's probably the most likely. There is, if you align with certain creatures in here before you find Loanziel, sorry, I'm totally butchering that, you might find yourself in combat with the dragon. It just depends on how you align yourself. Because if you align yourself and then you decide to go the other direction, it could be bad.
Okay.
I mean, obviously. I mean, anything in this Briny Maze could be bad. So you've got that. The last thing I want to mention, as far as a creature goes, is something it's legendary. It's on the cover of the very first Monster Manual, first edition. Been around forever. I've never played one of these, and there's good reason. It's kind of like that Tarrasque sort of story. Is what do you do with this? And there is inside the Briny Maze a purple worm. You know, those giant, how do you
worm.
fight one of these? Yep. And so you have to decide, again, this is one of those things where you have to decide how you want to deal with it. Any thoughts or any feedback on the creatures that you might find? There's other stuff in there. Those are just sort of the highlights of there's a lot of highlights.
Well, it's interesting. They follow a color palette with the purple worm and the amethyst dragon, and
yeah,
there's
the Encephalon cluster has a definite look to it. Flame skulls, yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
But yeah, that's quite a variety. I think it is interesting, and again, because I spend so much time homebrewing, I'm not as aware of the published materials. But is that typical to have that large of a population that you can choose to interact with or not interact with in a dungeon, or is that a little on the high end? I
would say it's on the high end, and I think it's because most of these are here to do something. They're really not all that different from you. The dragon and Gasa, the human mage, they're adventurers. The Githyanki is a war party. The Flumps are there for a reason. They're not just a random, they are there. And so all of those groups and others are potential partners to be able to at least talk to. Sometimes those conversations could go bad and you end up in combat anyway, but sometimes you could get some information first. But I think it's because everything is kind of there for the same reason you are. You have a very specific track, and that is you're looking for the shards to see what has happened to them or to stop these mind flayers from doing whatever it is they want to do with the shards. The other groups aren't really into that. They're just there to either kill Ilvash or to keep them under control or something like that.
I'm thinking this is in line with what appears to be Wizards of the Coast tendency in sort of the later 5th edition as far as moving away from slash and hack and a little more toward the social end of the game. But I feel like sounds like they've done a nice job in the sense that if you have a group that's more interested in just strategy and tactics and combat, you can still do that. But this gives you the option of other avenues of gameplay.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, you could go either way in this one. If you just want to run through and kill stuff, you can do that. If you prefer to do the strategy and or the talking, the role play, you can do that as well. There's a lot of options.
Use words. You can use words in this one if you want.
Words. The warning for the party that just wants to come through and kill everything is there's a lot of information to learn. That will make your trek a lot easier. So last thing I want to mention is that I haven't mentioned is a unique characteristic to this, and it's what I started the story with today is Gibbon and you the listener who are in that party are looking into this pool, and so this pool is not a pool of water. This is a pool of brain fluid.
Ew.
For lack of a better term. There's a better name for it, and I can't think what it is. But it is an extremely deep pool. And again, giving away spoilers here, this pool is 6 miles deep.
Oh, gosh.
And so Corin was absolutely right. You do not have to cast the water-breathing spell. You can just get in there and have that moment of fear while the liquid enters your lungs, but you are able to breathe it.
Ooh, yeah. There's some body horror in this.
Yes, you're able to breathe it. And
cerebrospinal fluid is what it's called.
Okay, spinal fluid. That's it. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, 6 mile deep pool of spinal fluid that leads to a pocket of the astral plane. And while this isn't necessarily part of the dungeon, it's the next step in the adventure. And so once you exit this pool of spinal fluid, you end up in this pocket sort of dimension of the astral plane, and you float about. And there are these small islands throughout here, and you can only see a few at a time. And so you go to these small islands, and again, you're looking for the mind flayers, you're looking for the obelisks. So you're going to these, but each island has some of them are just awful experiences, just terrible. Some of them are whimsical, but most of them are just not pleasant. And you have to deal with them because there are some things on each island that you're going to need later on. You don't have to go to all of them, but there are certain ones, and they are random. So it is possible. I guess I shouldn't say you don't have to go to all of them. Depending on the randomness of they become available to you, you may not have to go to all of them. There are a couple things that you got to get that if you don't have, you need to keep going and looking for them. But so that's the unique characteristic of this is there's not like, this is not a dungeon that you like, oh, I cleared it out and you leave. It's part of like the story adventure. So you come into it and then you leave it on another end. Now you will come back through it eventually. And hopefully you will come back through alive and healthy and be able to deal with things, because the Titanic creature that's in that 6 Mile Lake, it doesn't go away unless you've dealt with it the first time. And it's on the return that you are more likely to encounter it than on the way there.
Got it.
It just depends on how careful you are in managing your your swimming, I guess. So that's the Briny Maze. Last thing I want to mention, and then we'll wrap this up, is it doesn't have to do with the Briny Maze, but it has to do with this adventure and this Shattered Obelisk. I have not paid attention to this. There are these obelisks. This is not the only obelisk that has been mentioned in D&D Adventures. And I think there's a bigger plan here. So at the end of this book, they mentioned the Netherese obelisks. And here is where all the other ones show up, at least to this point. There's one in the Tomb of Annihilation, which is one of the first 5th edition adventures. The Lich Aseric has this obelisk in his fabled Tomb of the 9 Gods. Okay, so there's one. There's another one. I do not know this story at all. It's in Storm King's Thunder. The village of the Nightstone was built around an obelisk with unknown powers. The Cloud Giants stole the obelisk in a raid on the town. So there's another one. I don't know if I want to tell you this next one. I will. There is one in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So you guys may encounter an obelisk along the way, somewhere in the Underdark or in the Undermountain. And then the other one is in the story Out of the Abyss. I have that. I'm really struggling to think about which one that is. But the Darrow are attempting to assemble a broken obelisk beneath the Duergar city of Graxlok, as described in the adventure of Out of the Abyss. In its present broken state, the obelisk's magic is erratic. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 obelisks.
We've got something going on
that people know about. So I'm dying to see if Wizards brings more obelisks into the story. And I'm just picturing a giant adventure that has something to do with all these obelisks. I don't know, the Mind Flayers were really interested in it. So we'll have to see if it's Mind Flayers or maybe there's a larger picture here.
Well, not to bring it down.
Okay.
But as I said, I could only find one review, and it was just one D&D blogger, I guess, or has a web page. He was not a fan.
Okay, what do you say?
So he said he likes the concept, lots of rooms to explore, some interesting ways of opening doors, he mentions. But he said it's a linear dungeon that you have to visit every room, or almost every room. And he feels like the design was poor. So he says, just to emphasize the poor design, in the second to last room, you meet an NPC who wants something from you. and in return can tell you what other monsters are in the dungeon that you had to go into every room before you found the NPC. So maybe there's something more there that he missed. He says a previous dungeon includes a hinted chamber that you need to use levers to rotate into position, but you need to use the levers to progress further into the dungeon in the first place, so the mystery of the hidden chamber never features.
He said that as the dungeon to get here. Yes, I would agree with that. That was a little confusing.
Yeah. He says it's not all bad. Things aren't complicated, but they can feel really good. You can befriend NPCs who can help you negotiate challenges. You didn't mention this. You don't need to. We can leave it as a secret because he kind of does too. He says there's an immovable rod in the best place I've ever seen. My players loved it. So
I forgot all about that. Yes, there is.
So he felt like it didn't live up
to
his expectations.
You know what? I think that's fair. As somebody who I'm guessing he probably is a person who is a dungeon aficionado, loves the words and language he's using tells me that he's been through or looked at many different types of dungeons. I don't think anything he says there is unfair. I thought that was kind of funny that when you find the guy who's willing to tell you about the monsters. Now it is possible to get to him before going everywhere.
Okay.
That he might be telling you something, and it's possible he might be telling you some things that you could encounter on the way back through if your DM so chooses. I mean, a lot of times once you've finished the adventure, it's kind of like, like The Hobbit. You've killed Smaug, you've done all that. There's nothing to tell on the way back, but here there is potentially stuff to tell. So maybe there's some of that in there.
I think even if, we've been doing this long enough that if you're a DM who's really into it, it's easy enough to tweak some things.
Oh, yeah.
And as far as a player goes, I honestly, as a player, I don't know that I would recognize the linearness. I would probably be distracted and engaged in, what's the next NPC going to be? How are we going to deal with them?
Yeah. Yeah. The linear part, I don't know if that's referring to what I had said about you come in one place, you go out another place. If he's talking about that, because it's not the Briny Maze is not linear in that, I go here, then I move here, then I move here, and I'm going through doors and blah, 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 and it leads me. You can go wherever you want in this one, but like I said, there's some things you'll need to go back for if you skip something. And so he is right that you do kind of have to go to most of the rooms. There are a couple rooms that you do not have to go into. I would recommend exploring the entire Briny Maze because there's cool stuff in there. But the linear part I'm a little confused on, but you know what? That's how he sees it, and it's fair. I'm not going to criticize his criticism of the Briny Maze because we each see things differently. But I think it looks really cool. I'd love to run a party through it, and maybe some flaws would show up in that. And maybe that's what it is. He's played this through and felt as the DM or a player that there are certain things that were like, it didn't make any sense. Maybe that's there. I don't know. But I thought it was really cool and sounds like a lot of fun. And it's not very often you come across a dungeon like this.
Right.
It's very, very unique.
Sounds like they missed one opportunity, though.
What's that?
On the left side, you should get advantage on intelligence checks, and on the right side, you should get insight.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I was trying to think, how do you do the creative side? Yeah, insight would be good. Yeah, and who's to say that doesn't actually couldn't exist in your game? You could do that yourself. So, all right. Well, if you've played through the Briny Maze and the Shattered Obelisk, or the Shattered Obelisk, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback on how the Briny Maze went with your players or for you as a DM. And any info that you can give. There are fun surprises. Did I give everything away? I tried not to. I think there's some things I left. Well, I totally forgot about the immovable rod. But let us know. You can reach out to us on email with teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. We're also on the socials, Teachers in the Dungeon on Instagram and Facebook, @Dungeon Teachers on Twitter. And be sure to check out the YouTube page. I looked at it the other day, and it just looks so cool with all the art on each show. And you look at all the tiles of the videos, it just looks like a lot of fun. So be sure to go there and check that out. We'd love to have your comments there as well. So for Dan, I am Tom. We're going to exit this dungeon as quickly as we can. And so hopefully we'll roll a 20, just like you will this week. See you later, folks.